If you think about the water that's coming out of the spigots at Hot Springs National Park, like 4,000 years ago, it rained on the surface, and that water finally is coming back out.
Right.
This is the Exploring the National Parks podcast with Dirt in My Shoes. My name is Ash, and I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I think that the parks are best seen from the trail, and I'm here to make national park trip planning easy.
And I'm John. I carry the kids on the trails, I tell stories, and notice all the things that Ash doesn't care about much, like trees.
Join us as we show you around America's spectacular national parks.
We're sharing our favorite places, fun facts, adventures, and misadventures.
And we'll even throw in a little trip planning.
Let's start exploring. I absolutely love the Harry Potter series.
Oh, really?
I do.
I don't think we knew that.
And the Lord of the Rings. I feel like I'm cheating on Lord of the Rings if I say Harry Potter without saying Lord of the Rings.
Well, no, we're big Harry Potter fans in this family.
The movies of the Lord of the Rings are the best ever made, but the books of Harry Potter are way more accessible to kids, if you ask me.
I know, and I kind of fell off the wagon with Harry Potter a little bit, but as you've been reading the books to the kids lately, I have just been like in the kitchen doing the dishes or cooking dinner or something while he reads to the kids, and I'll just be over there chuckling. I love Fred and George so much.
I know. They're so
and
great.
they're so good in the books. That's what you forget. If you haven't read the books for a while, it's like they're the best in the books.
They're so funny.
So,
but right now, like you said, I'm reading the books to the kids, and I feel kind of like right now I'm a Harry Potter dad. Is kind of what my job is right now. I'm trying to make everything so fun for them and get them through the books and the series before things get spoiled eventually for them. It happened long enough ago that like the kids aren't talking about it regularly, and so nothing gets spoiled, surprisingly. But when I get on social media, I'm subscribed to like so many nerdy joke communities so that whenever Ash scrolls through my social media, it always reminds her of how weird and nerdy I am. And I just think that's funny. But lately I've been seeing a lot of shorts or reels or whatever that are kind of aimed at like girl dads or like moms that only have boys for kids. I've just been laughing. There's this one episode of Modern Family where Phil is just, the girls all get on the same cycle. And he's just like, I've heard rumors, but I thought that was just a story to keep women out of the submarine corps or something like that. Oh my gosh. It was just that whole episode is so funny.
Instagram knows I love Modern Family, by the way, because every time something Modern Family comes up, I watch it. And now my whole feed is just full of like Modern Family clips.
I know. It's so good.
It's so funny.
I love it when I go through that cycle. It's like sometimes I'll get The Office, sometimes I'll get Modern Family. The social media just knows what I want and it cycles me through stuff. But anyways, so I've just been laughing about, I just thought it was so funny recently, like looking at the demographics of a family and realizing how it changes like the whole family experience in the house. Well, Ash in our house, she's in a house full of boys. And that comes with some challenges, I'm sure, for Ash. Constant roughhousing, a consistent bad smell.
Lots of potty humor.
Exactly. So Ash is alone in her girldom in our house. But I'm alone too, folks. And this brings us back to Harry Potter, which is why I started with it. The demographics of our house are way skewed to one side. I am a lone misfit in a house of Ravenclaws. I feel like a Weasley twin in a house of Hermiones sometimes. Like, do you know how often my jokes go unappreciated?
It's the quantity. We can't laugh at everything.
Do you know how often my ideas get politely turned down because everybody in the house would rather read another chapter or two in the book that they're reading? Sometimes I just wander the house and then I just sit down next to Ash and I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself.
Because everybody's reading and
Yes.
John doesn't read.
Nobody wants to play with me in my own house sometimes.
And we're like, go away. Go get your own book.
I'm like, no, let's go play basketball or let's go play Quidditch. Come on, let's go play. So anyways, I've always kind of resonated. You mentioned them. I always resonated with Fred and George. And especially they have this amazing line in The Order of the Phoenix where Fred is talking to George and he says, let's see if I can do my best Fred and George accent. You know, George, I've always felt that our futures lay outside the world of academic achievement.
That's what dumb people say. I'm just kidding.
Oh, spoken like a true Ravenclaw, which was why I wasn't originally too excited about today's episode, by the way, because today's episode is the Hot Springs Fun Facts episode. Hot Springs National Park, that's what we're talking about. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Hot Springs National Park, but if you listened to our Exploring Hot Springs episode that we did a couple weeks ago, I thought maybe we covered all the fun stuff when we did that episode.
Sometimes we do these episodes for smaller parks and we're like, what are we going to do on the next one?
Well, Hot Springs is so small and it has such a super specific focus, right? It's all about drinking and bathing in hot thermal spring water.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, we have done everything to do in Hot Springs, and I would go back and do it all over again and again and again because it is a really fun place to go to and experience. But like digging deep into it, I thought to myself, I don't want this to be an episode that only Ravenclaws are gonna like because
we're all, ooh, goody, geothermal water.
Oh, the academic approach to early 20th century hygiene, you know.
Sean doesn't want to talk about 20th century hygiene.
Oh my gosh. So anyways, I wasn't super excited, but I have to tell you, as I dug in, I am so pleased to inform all the Gryffindors and Hufflepuffs and Slytherins out there, which I haven't taken the quiz because I have a clue about which one I'm going into and it doesn't bode well.
Well, which one?
I think I'm a Slytherin. But
am I really a Ravenclaw, though?
Oh, for sure.
But I do have a very strong hint of
revenge.
It's like an underlying layer.
I think we could like choose a main with a lean.
Yeah, I definitely would say I'm not Gryffindor. I'm not noble enough for Gryffindor. And Hufflepuff, I'm not kind enough for Hufflepuff. So it has to be the other two.
You're a Ravenclaw with a lean Slytherin.
Or a Slytherin with a lean Ravenclaw.
Right. And I might be the weird one that's probably like I could probably be a Hufflepuff lean Slytherin or a Slytherin lean Hufflepuff. Maybe.
That's a weird mixture.
I'm not sure about that.
I know. We'll have to ask J.K. Rowling. She'll be able to tell us. But as I was digging in, I realized this isn't just going to be an academic episode. There is some super cool stuff about hot springs that isn't just about, and this is how they bathed, and this was the technology that they used because they thought that it would bring them good health. No, there's so much cool stuff here. And I think I discovered two really important things for people hoping to visit hot springs. I think I discovered the heart of hot springs and the swagger of hot springs. We're really getting to know the personality of this place.
It does have a personality.
Mm-hmm.
Some parks you go into and you're like, this park just, no words necessary. And
right.
Some parks you go to and you're like, I'm going to need a little bit more.
Exactly.
And Hot Springs is definitely one of those because at first glance, I think you're kind of like, I'm going to need a little bit more.
Exactly. Well, I think I'm going to give you a little bit more today, but we can't jump right into the heart of it or into the swagger of it all. Every superhero has an origin story. And so we have to start at the beginning, at the origin. Bruce Wayne wasn't always Batman and Elvis wasn't always the king. And Marshall Mathers wasn't always Eminem. So
I was like, who's Marshall Mathers?
Exactly. So
is that why he says M and M? Because Marshall Mathers?
Wow.
M&M.
I never put that together.
And then he just didn't want to copy the candy, so he wrote it out phonetically.
That is really interesting.
Marshall Mathers.
Might be worth Googling.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so let's get to the origin story of hot springs. The origin story of hot springs actually starts out, miraculously, in the same way as Big Bend National Park. That's right. All the way over in West Texas. Eventually they go their separate ways, but they start in essentially the same place, 500 million years ago. Pangea hasn't formed yet, and the area from West Texas out to Arkansas is part of a deep water ocean. And while they're there, sediments from the faraway mountains of North America are getting deposited here. Layer upon layer upon layer, millennia after millennia. Tons and tons of sediment getting deposited and building up the land at the bottom of the ocean. And it stays that way for about 200 million years. Then, about 300 million years ago, during the formation of Pangea, a tectonic plate from the south crashed into the bottom of North America. And as this plate pushed northward, it crunched up all the sediments that had been accumulating on the bottom of the ocean. And this tectonic plate acted basically like a giant snowplow and shoved all of this sediment and created a giant new mountain range called the Ouachita Mountains. Now, unlike most mountain ranges in the U.S., the Ouachita Mountains ran horizontally east to west from the Appalachian Mountains on the east all the way out to the Big Bend Mountains in Texas. Now, over time, the mountains eroded away so that when you see them today, you only see about a fraction of what they used to be. But the mountains that surround Hot Springs National Park, those are the remnants of those Ouachita Mountains, but it's not necessarily the mountains that are actually important to the story of Hot Springs National Park and the origin story. It's the way that the mountains formed that were important.
The snowplow.
The snowplowing effect, exactly. All of those layers of rock, they solidified really hard. And so when that tectonic plate crunched up forward, it's not like it just kind of mushed everything together. If you've ever seen a bulldozer taking care of cement, the land doesn't really mush together. It just kind of breaks and then piles on top.
Like
right?
breaks into chunks.
Exactly. And so that's kind of how these mountains formed. This whole landscape was formed. It's just a whole broken pile of cement, basically, as you can imagine it that way. And so over time, you just have this piling up happening, and the earth is all twisted and turned, and all these layers are super funky, and it's really cool, but it's all broken. And it's just a landscape with tons of fractures and fault lines, big and small, cutting through the landscape beneath you. And then you add one special ingredient: rain. Okay? Rain falls from the sky, and a lot of it gathers into streams and rivers, and it rushes out to sea. But some of it finds its way into these cracks in the earth. And then it's like the water has entered into a labyrinth, and it seeps down deeper into the earth. And as the cracks kind of intersect, it gives the water choices on which direction it wants to go. Well, Hot Springs water always goes deeper. Deeper with every choice, deeper every intersection, but every choice has a consequence. And with every choice to go deeper, two things happen. Number one is the water becomes more evil.
Oh, really?
Yes. And number two is it gets closer to fighting the Balrog because it delved too greedily and too deep. Okay, no, actually, two very real things happen. Number one is it got hotter. And number two is it picked up a bunch of minerals along the way.
Ooh, that's so interesting how it gets down into the ground because of those cracked pieces of cement that are piled on top of each other. That already makes the park cooler to me.
Right, but it's also, as we mentioned this in the Exploring Hot Springs episode, but this isn't like Yellowstone water.
Right.
This is not volcanic at all. So it's not getting heated because of a large magma plume or something right underneath Hot Springs. Okay. No, it gets hotter because the closer you get to the center of the Earth, it just gets warmed up.
The ground just gets warmer.
Everything is warmer closer to the center of the Earth. And so it's warming up.
So it has to go so deep to get as hot as it is.
Okay. So
because it's really hot water.
It's really hot water. So when the water started its journey, it had no idea what it was getting itself into. That one choice would change it forever. Do I go with the flow and go to a river and head out to the ocean like everybody else? Or do I answer to the call to adventure and see where the crack in the earth takes me? Well, once on the path to hot springs water, there's no turning back. And so one step turns into two, two turns into four, and pretty sure days and days this water's going down deep, deep into the earth. Suddenly weeks turn into months, months turns into years, and it's still getting deeper and deeper. Years turn into decades, decades turn into centuries, and it's still going down. And during this whole process, it's getting hotter, and it's picking up and dissolving things as it goes, and so it's picking up little souvenirs. Down, down, down for 4,000 years.
That's mind-blowing.
If you think about the water that's coming out of the spigots at Hot Springs National Park, like 4,000 years ago, it rained on the surface, and that water finally is coming back out.
Right. 4,000 years ago, but now it's 8,000 feet deep.
Sheesh.
In the earth is that's the final depth that it finally got to. And then something new happened. So it's not even back out of the earth yet. After 4,000 years, it reaches its deepest part.
Oh, so the spigot water is older than 4,000 years.
Yeah.
That's what you're telling me.
Exactly.
Oh, crazy.
Yes, because at that 4,000 year mark, at that 8,000 feet deep mark, something happens that hasn't happened to it ever at this point. It stops going down, and it's almost like all of the water is converging on one specific fault line or crack that's different from all the others, and it doesn't lead down. It sucks the water in, and for the first time in thousands of years, the water is heading up. And it's heading up at an incredible speed. It took 4,000 years to get all the way down. It's now heading back up towards us at 10 times that speed. It feels as if nothing is in the water's control, and then it looks around and realizes that it's not alone. Plenty of water has answered the call to adventure. And now, after everything, the only thing it can do is go with the flow. And before you know it, in 1/10 of the time it took to get all the way down there, in 400 years, it goes from the very bottom and gets shoved to the surface. This is fun fact number one. Fun fact number one is that every day, 700,000 gallons of water finishes this journey through the depths of the earth and emerges back at the surface in Hot Springs National Park at an average of 143 degrees Fahrenheit.
Sheesh.
That's so cool. That's a ton of water.
Yeah, it's amazing because, I don't know, I feel like a lot of other places, you don't get to know the story of the water, or all you hear is that it rains, it goes down, like in Yellowstone, it rains, it kind of does some stuff in the water table, and then it boils back up.
Right.
There's some interesting things that can happen there, but this is totally different, and 4,400-year-old water is what's coming out of that.
I'm just amazed that there's so much, and that it can come back out without because that's not boiling.
Nope.
And so, again, different from Yellowstone, where you've got, you do have some cold water, geysers and stuff too. But just that the water can travel up from those depths of the earth so fast.
Right.
Without it being because it's boiling back up to the top or whatever, it's just a journey it takes. That's crazy.
Yeah. But I don't mean to be snooty about Yellowstone either, but this hot springs water, one of the best things that we talked about in exploring is this is drinkable water.
Right.
At Yellowstone.
And it doesn't smell.
Yes. That is what I'm saying.
Which is a big deal.
Yes, that is the snootiness that I'm kind of experiencing as I'm talking about it.
We put up our noses to the smells in Yellowstone.
Yes.
How dare this water smell like that?
I know. when we were in Iceland, a lot of the water from the tap sometimes had that sulfury egg smell to it. And so it wasn't super fun to drink.
I know. I can't drink it.
Yeah.
So I did feel snooty because I'm like, I know this is some of like the best water in the world, probably.
But it smells. I can't.
Drink it. I gotta go bottled.
I know. But this hot springs water is totally different. What an epic journey, though.
Yeah.
Right? And what a cool origin story for this water. So you don't have to be snooty about it. You can get it out of the spigots or whatever that they have at hot springs. You can drink it. You can smell it. And honestly, it's just like really nice mineral water.
Yeah. And people they bring tons of gallon jugs and just fill up their gallon jugs and then take it back to their house and stuff. It's a thing.
It's a major thing around here. But the water, so there's 47 springs that it comes out of, but it's all located within like a 2.5 acre sized plot.
Yeah.
Basically. So all of this water is gathering in all of these cracks in the earth, and it's this massive fault line and everything like that. It's all coming up, but it's all coming up in like this one little spot.
Just this one tiny spot in Arkansas.
Yep. It's so unique and it's so wild. But I think without the journey, sometimes it's just like, oh, it's just a spring of water.
Right. Well, it feels like just what you can get at your house. It's
Well,
like I have a faucet that brings water out too.
Exactly. Okay, but that's what you just said is one of the reasons why hot springs has changed so much over the years. Because we have hot water on demand anywhere in the country right now.
Mm-hmm.
But back when this place was discovered, it was so unique.
Right.
Hot water?
To be like, there's hot water right here that I can drink.
I don't have to spend an hour gathering water into pails and like putting it in a pot and boiling it for my own bath or something like that. You know? This was totally a huge deal. And so when people found place with hot water literally bubbling out of the earth, it's easy to imagine to people like 200 years ago thinking, wait a second, there's something special about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways it's partially because it's a little bit cultural, because if you think about it, it may have reminded them of scenes throughout the Bible where miracles were performed. If you're in the New Testament, Jesus healing a man by the pool of Bethesda, or Jesus healing a man's blindness after putting mud on his eyes and then having him wash in the pool of Siloam, right? Or even further back in the Old Testament, Naaman being healed of leprosy by the Jordan River. The water here having mineral properties and being hot is kind of seen as like healing waters.
Right.
And it's really special and it's kind of easy, but from our modern sensibilities where hot water just comes out of
my faucet.
Exactly.
I don't have to do anything for it.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about the origins of Hot Springs National Park, think of it from an 1804 perspective. We just purchased the Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson just sent Lewis and Clark out to the Pacific Ocean, but he also sent an expedition to the southern expanse of the Louisiana Purchase around Louisiana, Arkansas, to see what was there that he purchased. And that's where they found these hot springs. And they were like so curious about what they found. They're like, this place is so cool. We found this place where hot water bubbles out of the ground between 130 and 150 degrees. There's tons of algae. It's forming all of these cool like designs when it calcifies and things like that. And they just sent him this amazing message back saying, hey, this place is way cool. Thumbs up on your purchase.
Yeah.
You know?
Baths all around.
Exactly. So the word got out fast. And then by the 1820s, there was so much interest and development in the area that the locals actually asked the federal government to intervene to protect the water resources and to manage them. And so this leads us to fun fact number 2, which is that on April 20th, 1832, President Andrew Jackson signed legislation setting aside specific land in Hot Springs and protecting it as a special reservation. 40 years before Yellowstone became a national park, which is why Hot Springs National Park kind of has a claim. Listen, we were a national park first.
I know, they just weren't called that. The National Park Service wasn't even a thought at that point. And so it was just like, we got to protect this. Let's set it aside. That's the very American idea, right? That was born of the national parks and stuff. But yeah, a lot of people don't know that Hot Springs was so early on. It's just that it wasn't a national park. And so we don't count it the same we count it Yellowstone. But it's like, no, that really was the first place that they were like, we got to save this place.
Right. Hot Springs had the same problem as Yellowstone and a lot of the other early national parks too, though, because there was no plan. And there was no organizational structure set up to actually protect or manage the new water resource, the hot springs that they were supposed to protect, right? And so it didn't actually really help things for a really long time. But my question is, where did they come up with this really unique idea? In the 1820s, what was happening in hot springs that they're like, listen, we can't do this on our own. We need the government to step in.
Right.
And so there had to have been something that prompted it.
And you know?
Heck yeah, I know. Okay, so what was going on? It's the quote that they use always in the West that they somewhat attribute to Mark Twain, where he says, whiskey is for drinking and water is for?
Fighting over.
Water is for fighting over, exactly. And so thousands of people were flocking to hot springs, okay? Settlers realized early on that this place had incredible potential for healing, but also business potential as kind of like a health resort.
Right.
And so relatively quickly, you had kind of makeshift bathhouses popping up all over the place. Some were nice wooden ones with actual structures, but a lot of them were basically just tents with a tub.
Right.
Either way, you kind of had this boom of health seekers and health entrepreneurs all converging here at Hot Springs. And while the federal government officially had control and jurisdiction, they didn't enforce any rules or like have any rules. They're like,
we don't know what to do.
Yes.
Which happened in Yellowstone too. And then they're like, no, we'll just send the army.
Exactly. And so that worked out really well for Yellowstone. But with Hot Springs, it was a little different because it was kind of Confederate land. And so like a lot of the...
you forget that was before Civil War and everything. Yeah.
A few of the first superintendents, I think, were former Confederate officers.
Interesting.
And so it was a really interesting time period and so much disorganization going on, but you had this one water resource, 47 springs, but how do we use it? How do we split it up? And I don't think you would have liked it very much.
Me?
Yes. Because...
Was it unfair?
Well, it was just so chaotic.
Yeah.
But
I don't do well with chaos or injustice.
Right.
So
exactly.
It sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen for me.
Which is why this next chapter of Hot Springs history, there's a couple of things in there that I think you'll really find peeving you, if I could use that word. It's just like, I don't know if I like that. So, tents and bathhouses all mixed together. We've kind of covered that. But a lot of the water that was being delivered, you know, if you've ever seen a Christmas movie where they have like 1,000 Christmas lights all plugged into one outlet, that's kind of what they were doing.
Oh, so everyone was trying to use the same springs.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Most of the bathhouses were downhill and the springs were uphill.
Okay.
And if you've ever been on a log flume ride, like at a theme park or something like that, that's basically how they were delivering water. You had a bunch of like carved wooden pipes or something like that, or somewhat of an aqueduct delivering water to different places. But you just had so many of them plugged in and so many people competing. It's like, I'm just going to unplug this one and put mine in. You know, and so you had all this weird stuff. But then this is the thing that I think is going to really get you. A place called Rawl City. Now, if you've heard our episode about exploring, and we've even talked about it in this episode, the water isn't just for bathing, it's also for drinking, right? Rawl City is difficult because the thermal water really was helping a lot of people. Advertisement for hot springs boasted amazing results for people with all kinds of ailments, and so people were coming here on their own, but doctors were also prescribing visits to hot springs as a way to cure whatever they were going through. But not everybody could afford a bath. And so you had all these people from all over who were struggling with all kinds of health problems. You had war veterans who needed relief from their injuries. You had people with respiratory and skin problems, arthritis, digestive issues, people with diseases like syphilis. All of these different kinds of ailments, people were finding relief in these bathing, healing waters.
As you're listing this off, I'm thinking, there's no way in heck I'm getting in that bathtub.
Well, this is okay. So what do? You want to heal all these people. You want to help them all. You don't want to turn them away, but you have these businesses set up. But the poor and the needy can't get into them because they can't afford it. So that's where Rawl City comes in. Most of the bathhouses were located downhill from the springs. Well, a lot of these people that couldn't afford the bathhouses realized, I can just go to the source. And so they climbed up the hill.
Oh my gosh.
They dug out little pools where the spring was, and they would lay in those pools at the source of the spring. And then the water would go downhill to all the bathhouses where people would bathe in it and people would drink it.
I am such a germaphobe. When we were full-time RVers for 3 years, my germophobia just came out in full force. You would not believe how many people don't wash their hands after they go to the bathroom in public spaces.
Yes.
And that just makes me so... Oh
Yes.
my gosh.
But-
Can I even get that when we go modern day hot springs, bathhousing?
Mm-hmm. Which is why they clean them in front of you.
It's like, I want to watch you disinfect this before I get in.
Right, which they do, by the way, so
they
don't
do,
worry
yeah.
about it. But this was before germ theory. Germ theory was kind of like in the 1860s.
Okay.
Was when that first came up. But even still, people were kind of like, I don't want to drink water that those people up the hill are bathing in, even though they didn't really have any idea about germs.
There was something in their subconscious saying, this probably is not a good idea.
Why is there a hair in this water? Oh my gosh. So there's a lot of conflict here. You can totally see the business people downhill being mad about the stuff going uphill. Whoever's trying to manage the resource is like, listen, I don't want to turn these people away. Look, they're injured. They have this ailment. They're getting better because of bathing in this hot water, right? So much conflict going on. People fighting over it. There were even gunfights and stuff over the water resources. Very Wild Westy in a lot of ways. What do? How do we fix this problem? Well, in 1878, Hot Springs got a chance for a do-over. In 1878, basically the whole town of Hot Springs burned down.
Oh. Wow.
Kind of a rough do-over.
Yeah, that is a rough do-over.
Right, but in America, we love nothing more than a good comeback story, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so, in true American fashion, Hot Springs picked itself back up and built back even better than before. But this time, the federal government was more involved. And they realized the need of these healing waters, and they saw the opportunity for all the good that they can do. And so with local partners, they built something that nobody, even now, will really ever see, but something that helped millions of people experience those healing waters. But they had to start from scratch because everything burnt down. They had a clean slate, but it kind of reminds me of when we make cider in our house. We recently just made cider, and it's totally worth it, and it's super wonderful and tastes delicious. But every time it's kind of like, I buy 20 pounds of apples and I only get 1 gallon of cider. It's a little frustrating, but what they built took so much work, and it was so sophisticated, and it helped millions of people, but like I said, it's almost always overlooked. And it can be explained with one simple word, and as soon as I say this word, you're immediately going to discount it because it's such a mundane part of our lives. Plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you say that word, you're like, I just turn on the sink, or I flush the toilet, or I take a shower. It's all taken care of, right? And so it's such a regular part of our life, we don't realize how big of a deal it was. But without this new plumbing system, there was no way that the regulators or the superintendent, whoever wanted to manage this, was going to be able to spread those healing waters around enough to help us get to fun fact number 4. Fun fact number 3 is coming up. But
I was like, you skipped 3.
I could see it in your eyes. I was like, we'll get there. Fun fact number 4 is the goal. Fun fact number 3 is the how.
Okay.
And so the first thing they realized is they needed to control the input and the output. So they took control of all 47 springs, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
They cleaned them up, they filled them in, they kind of sanitized the whole situation, and then they covered them up, and then they kind of built their own pipes to them. Then they built an arch over Hot Springs Creek. Did you know that along Bathhouse Row, basically underneath your feet as you're walking up Bathhouse Row, is a river?
Oh, really?
Yes.
I kind of wondered where all the water went because you can see like the spring, up by Bathhouse Row, but then it's like, where's all the water now? Yeah.
In the earlier hot spring setup with all the tents and the wooden bathhouses and stuff like that, basically the water would come out, they would distribute it however they could, and then all the wastewater would just flow to the creek. It was a big muddy mess. And then it would.
Gross.
So what they decided to do was they pretty much just built an arch over the whole creek for like a mile or so, and then covered it all up. And so that way they can control the input and the output. Now, the next part. They built this amazing collection system that gathers all the water from the springs and gathers it into some underground reservoirs. Underneath the parking area of the NPS admin building, there is a reservoir that can hold 268,000 gallons of hot thermal water. And then there are 2 additional reservoirs up above Bathhouse Row that can each hold 100,000 gallons of hot thermal water. All in all, they can store 468,000 gallons of hot thermal water. And because they've been pumping water into these reservoirs for so long and using these pipes for so long with hot water, all of the ground around these reservoirs is saturated with heat, so the water stays super hot. But here's a question, Ash. Were the baths you took in the Buckstaff and in the Quapaw, were they 143-degree baths?
No, thank goodness. That would hurt.
That would hurt so
very
bad.
badly. I'm a solid 105
Yes.
for my hot tubbing experience.
I like that too. I might even be just a little cooler,
I think you're cooler.
I'm a little cooler.
I can withstand a lot hotter temperatures than you.
If your bath wasn't 143 degrees and the water doesn't cool down very much in those reservoirs, how do you cool down the water?
You add cold.
Are they, quote unquote, watering down the thermal water?
No, because some of the thermal water
Is cold.
Because there's cold. Yes, there's cold taps.
There are cold taps.
Is it different?
But
It's not the
they're different.
same. It's not the.
It's-
Well, I mean, it makes sense. It wouldn't be the thermal water, but it's still like the spring water, right?
It is still.
Why are we filling up
From the cold taps if it's not
special hot springs water?
Okay, so let's just make this statement and see if we can agree. Wouldn't it be a bummer if they just mixed in regular cold city water to kind of cool down the thermal water? Wouldn't it feel like they were kind of like diluting your experience?
Yeah, maybe that's why I still have all my ailments.
Maybe. But that's not why you still have the ailments.
I'm just a hypochondriac. That's why.
Yes. This is fun fact number 3. Fun fact number 3 is they actually designed a second, entirely separate water system with a 400,000 gallon reservoir and 2 heat exchangers that works like a giant radiator to cool down and store thermal water.
So it's still the thermal water, but they cool it.
Yes, from the exact same springs.
See, I knew it because I was like, well, why? They have all these cold water taps
Exactly.
around hot springs. And I was like, well, no, I don't want just regular water.
I want hot springs water.
So when you're drinking water from those cold water spring taps, they're far away from the Bathhouse Row.
Right.
Those are spring water from the mountains.
Oh,
So we're not.
totally different. So it is a farce.
Just
It's
kidding.
still spring water that you're drinking there that's cold spring
But
water.
it's not 4,400 years old.
It's not 4,400 years old.
Okay.
So what they wanted to do, they thought this water had healing properties. And so they didn't want to dilute your experience. They didn't want to give you some thermal water with your bath or
Right.
some thermal water with your drink. They wanted the whole experience to be thermal water. And so every drop of water used in those bathhouses is from those hot springs. The second system is designed, like I said, like a radiator. So what they do is they pump it into this reservoir, and then as it goes to the different bathhouses, the first heat exchanger is like an air conditioner, basically, where you have these pipes of hot water that's coming out of this reservoir, and it's blowing cold water at the pipe to try to cool down the water. If the water still doesn't get cold enough, they then turn on the second exchanger, which runs cold city water over the pipes to cool down the water.
Interesting.
But even still, the water only gets to about 75 to 90 degrees. And that's what the cold water spigots that the bath attendants and the buck staff or some of these other places, that's the cold water spigot, or that's the cold water turn on and off handle. And so it's mixing the cooled thermal water with the hot thermal water so that you can experience the healing properties of the water. And that's
pretty
so cool.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In our current world, that makes zero sense because we
Right.
can just take a bath in our own house
Right.
and we're fine. But if you were in the 1800s or if you were in the early 1900s and you didn't have access to your own indoor plumbing, or you didn't have access to these mineral waters or regular,
Just good, clean water.
or medical care,
Yeah.
people would come here and they would expect to use this thermal water, and they were really hoping for some type of healing.
Sheesh.
And it's so cool.
That is cool. That's really cool. I had no idea that was under all the bathhouses and stuff.
Like I said, you don't even get a chance to see it. All in all, they've designed a complete system that can store 868,000 gallons of thermal water
Cool.
for all of these bathhouses and things. And they did that because the heart of Hot Springs National Park really is the healing. It's about the healing waters, which is why in 1887, they built the first ever Army-Navy hospital.
The
Which was
creepy
then,
building.
yeah, which was then replaced in 1960 with that new giant upgraded tall one that just kind of looms over Bathhouse Row. So that was built in 1960. But the government also saw the need, remember we talked about this, for the people that didn't have the funds to pay for a bath. And so the government also built a few different free bathhouses, which then culminated in the Libby Bathhouse, which is closed at the moment, I think, undergoing some renovations and things like that. But that was the culmination of this is the Mother Teresa bathhouse, basically, where people who couldn't afford to go to a traditional bathhouse could go and receive services there.
Okay.
Which I think is super cool.
Yeah.
And then in 1914, just down the road from Bathhouse Row, the Levi Memorial Hospital opened. It was a Jewish philanthropic hospital that used the thermal water to treat all kinds of ailments, but it specialized in rheumatism and arthritis. And so you had all of these things working together to get people healthy and to promote healing. And in a lot of ways, we just don't understand it
Yeah.
because we have so many modern conveniences that provide us with a hot shower or hot water or anything like that. But in the 1920s or the late 1800s, even all the way up to the 1960s, it's almost as if the whole country was going to hot springs. It's kind of like in the Bible when Moses holds up the bronze serpent and people look at it, everybody's going to the bronze serpent. Everybody was coming to hot springs, which brings us to fun fact number 4. And the culmination of the heart of hot springs, which is the healing, is that in 1946, over 1 million baths were taken in Hot Springs National Park.
Just in 1946.
Just in 1946. I feel kind of like Will Ferrell from Elf when he goes into the coffee shop and he's like, "Great job, you guys."
The world's greatest coffee.
Exactly. "Great job, everybody. We took 1 million baths this year." In today's world, that just sounds ludicrous. because we're taking baths all the time.
Right.
But it was such a big deal back then.
Yeah.
And so there was a serious culture in the country around the bathing experience at hot springs that would make you healthier.
1,000,000 babs. Good job, guys.
I know. So much fun. Now, for our last fun fact, we're going to take a serious 180.
Yes, I'm excited about that.
This is going to be really fun. Okay, so we talked about the heart of hot springs. We're departing from that, going the complete other direction. We're going to talk about the swagger of hot springs for just a second. After the fire of 1878, they rebuilt everything back. They built it back better than ever, but they built it back in a very specific way and in a way that is emblematic of a very specific era in the United States, the Roaring '20s. And it's so cool, but did you know it's actually really hard to find parts of America that still kind of look like the Roaring '20s? But Hot Springs is one of them. Recently, I was watching a behind-the-scenes look at how they made the movie Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. One of the funnest aspects of the Fantastic Beasts movies for me is that they're set in 1920s New York City.
Yeah.
And the 20s, man, they had some serious swagger.
That's why we need to go to Universal, because they're building the Fantastic Beasts, Paris and New York. And anyway, they're building it. I don't think they're doing New York, though, actually. I think it was Paris and London.
Oh, interesting.
But maybe it still has swagger.
It probably
It looks
does.
pretty cool if you watch their little videos showing what it's going to be. I'm so excited. I love Universal.
I know. It's so cool. But just think about it, like the jazz, the music, the speakeasies, prohibition, women wearing the flapper dresses and all the men wearing suits, silent films and talkies, the Model T on the road with horses and carriages. It's such a cool vibe. It's a revolutionary time in the US, in the world, really. Well, anyways, in this behind-the-scenes video for Fantastic Beasts, a team of producers, directors, and executives, they all went to New York City in search of places to film the movie. They were looking around. There's got to be a section that kind of resembles what we're looking for, 1920s kind of vintage New York. But you know what? They couldn't find it.
They went to Hot Springs.
They did not go to Hot Springs. For certain, you can still find buildings, and there are aspects of the architecture in New York City that still kind of have a little bit of that 1920s vibe. But things changed so fast here in America that they actually decided it was easier to recreate and build their own set of New York City in 1920s in England than to try to find a spot in New York City. And so, like, in places like...
Should have gone to Hot Springs.
I know, they should have. It would have been so cool. But, like, I was thinking about it, like, in Paris and London and a lot of, like, these European cities, they don't change that much. Like, over the years. You can probably visit, you know...
Well, I mean, there's buildings there that are 900 years old, just on the corner.
Exactly. And so it's kind of easier to recreate that vibe a little bit. If you're making a movie or something, you can find places in Paris, or you can find places in Berlin, I don't know, any of these places, and you can kind of get that vibe. But in America, it's a little harder because we're always building better and on top of what was there before. And so I just thought it was super interesting that it was so hard to find 1920s New York in New York. But you know where you can find the 1920s Roaring '20s vibe. It's in Hot Springs National Park in all of its glory.
Yeah.
And so you have all of these bathhouses that are built in that style, and a lot of them are renovated to continue to always have that. So we'll always see that. But just look on the other side of the street and it's modern America. But back in the late 1800s, Hot Springs was an up-and-coming place. And it had all of the aspects of the 1920s roaring New York vibe that you would want. It had the jazz clubs. It had the speakeasies. It had the boxing and the baseball. It had the automobiles. It had the gangsters.
Yeah. It's got some seedy gangster vibes for sure.
Exactly. Because not only was hot springs important as like a health icon, people could go there to get better, but it was also fashionable.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had anybody who's anybody is going to hot springs. And so you've got presidents of the United States. You have people like Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, Harry Truman, JFK. He spoke at the Arlington Hotel at the very top of Bath Row. You have all these presidents that show up in Hot Springs National Park. You've got Sam Houston. He was the first president of the Republic of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He showed up in Hot Springs. And then you've got who's going to sing in all the clubs and the speakeasies. You've got Bill Bojangles Robinson. Tony Bennett is actually rumored to have rehearsed for the first time "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" in one of the clubs in Hot Springs. So there was one of the first places that ever had spring training for baseball was Hot Springs. And so in 1886, they were called the Chicago White Stockings at the time. But that's not the White Sox.
It's not?
It's the Cubs.
Oh.
That's funny.
Yeah. So the White Stockings, they visited Hot Springs and they had their spring training there. And then eventually 5 other teams started having their spring training in Hot Springs.
Because they could go sit in the baths after a hard day's work on the field.
Exactly. The Chicago Cubs, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Brooklyn Nationals, the Chicago White Stockings, the Boston Red Sox, all these teams, they all went down there. Like 250 baseball stars down there. And actually Hot Springs has recently started, it's like this new baseball walk. So you can like walk around town and see all these cool places where Babe Ruth or some of these other famous early baseball stars did certain things. I think he hit his first 500-foot home run in Hot Springs.
During spring training.
Yeah. And so it's just, stuff is happening here. But like I mentioned, the gangsters were here too.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have all of this other stuff that you would expect to see up in New York City, and it's all coming down. It's all coming down to Arkansas. And this is the place where in 1960, this is fun fact number 5. In 1960, the Department of Justice said that Hot Springs was the site of the nation's largest illegal gambling operation.
Nice.
Bigger than Chicago, bigger than Vegas, bigger than New York, bigger than anything else in the world, basically. Hot Springs National Park. Because you had people like Al Capone, you had people like Lucky Luciano or Owen the Killer Madden. They were coming down here. Some of them were just like here for a weekend. And
I was going to say, are they here for vacation?
Well, Al Capone, he came down, he loved it so much, he would basically rent out an entire floor of the Arlington Hotel with him and like 80 of his goons. And they would go golfing during the day, or they'd go and take a bath, or they would just have fun. But some of the guys, the caddies, the locals that worked at the golf course that were the caddies, they had a game that they would play where they would have to spot the one guy that wasn't playing. There was always one guy that was playing with Al Capone. He was at least walking the course, but he wasn't playing. Do you know why he wasn't playing?
He was a bodyguard.
There was a Tommy gun in his golf bag. And so that was his job. He would walk around the golf course with Al Capone. The other guys would play, and he would be the security guy.
Yeah.
And so if somebody showed up to take out his man, he'd pull out that Tommy gun and say hello to my little friend.
Oh my gosh. I like how you're like, they're playing golf and bathing by day,
you know. Heaven knows what at night.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. So cool. So Hot Springs National Park, they have kind of like this oral history they recorded. And so they have these interviews that they had with a lot of these bath attendants. So you can read, they're asking this woman, so did you ever have any presidents, or who were the most famous people that you massaged or that you helped go through the bathing process and things like that. And they have all of these stories that they're sharing. And it's super interesting. And there was a guy he was a taxi cab driver. And he said that he gave Al Capone a ride across the street. And Al Capone gave him a really big tip. But after he dropped Al Capone off just across the street, a car full of FBI agents pulled up behind him and basically pulled him out of the car and were like, "What happened?"
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And so it was a really interesting town. Depending on how the election went, a large part of the population of locals were against illegal gambling. And so they would elect a mayor that was against it. And so he would hire a police chief that would crack down on stuff. Well, then the next mayor, if the other side got in charge, then he would put in place people that would just kind of look the other way. And so you had this constant back and forth of illegal gambling or moonshining. And so Al Capone, a few miles down the road from Hot Springs National Park, is a very well-known, it's a spring water company basically, and they export the water all around the country in glass bottles. It's like Mountain Valley spring water. Al Capone came down, saw the opportunity, hired a bunch of local moonshiners, and then filled his Mountain Valley spring water bottles up with moonshine and then sent it back north to disguise it.
Oh my gosh.
And so this place was the hub of activity for a lot of these early 1900s super gangsters.
And here's the thing, like Hot Springs did experience a decline when we stopped appreciating hot water from the ground and the health benefits and stuff like that. But I do think there has been a revival of downtown Hot Springs, which is where you'll find the bathhouses and stuff across the street. A lot of these businesses are really embracing, kind of like you said, the baseball walk and stuff like that. Like they're starting to embrace and kind of bring back those stories from the Roaring 20s and stuff, just as a nod to the history, but then also just as a visitor and you're just kind of walking downtown and you're like, huh, this is really different.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's different in a fun, kind of cool way.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of the revival of Hot Springs now. If you were to visit today, it's like you will see bits and pieces of that history. And there are investors coming in to a lot of these older buildings that have been shuttered and kind of condemned.
Right.
Since the decline of Hot Springs.
Yeah.
And they're coming in and they're saying, we're gonna restore this. We're gonna make it cool again.
Right.
As a nod to the history that you've just described.
I know. So. I'm hoping that eventually I'll be able to go back to Hot Springs and I'll get to wear one of my early 1900s cool tuxedos and you'll be in a flapper dress and we'll go on the promenade and we'll be with a bunch of other people and then we'll just make our way to a big band, jazz band, and we'll just do some
But they do, like they have jazz clubs, like they're reviving that. I'll have to find my flapper dress.
Yes.
I'm not sure where it is.
Oh,
so.
You'll look so good in a flapper dress. It'll be so good.
It's just got to dust that thing off.
Oh, I'm going to be a Dapper Dan man, and I'm going to slick my hair back.
Oh, are you?
It'll be so good. Get a couple cigars.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll talk like this, Shay. It'll be so much fun.
It's a really cool place. It is. It's so different, though.
Yes, it definitely is. But I hope that today's episode kind of opens up people's eyes a little bit to kind of maybe see below the surface a little bit. Because a lot of Hot Springs is below the surface. From the plumbing to the history, you have to kind of search it out and find it a little bit. And when you do, you're able to see Hot Springs through a new lens.
Yeah.
And you can see it through the swagger of the 1920s or any time during that era. And a lot of the cool things that made that era what it is and why it's so famous, you can see that exemplified in Hot Springs National Park. So for the task today, I think we should ask Ash on the Dirt in My Shoes Instagram or the Facebook page. We should ask people on their future trip to Hot Springs National Park. Are they going for the heart of Hot Springs, which is the healing waters? Or are they more interested in the swagger of Hot Springs National Park?
I feel like that's a hard decision.
I agree. I think I'm leaning swagger all the way.
We truthfully, last time we went, did not do much of the swagger part. We have little kids.
Right.
And so our swagger was not swagging with little children.
Right. Because they do have a museum that has a lot of gangster stuff. And
Yeah.
they have a wax museum as well that was the site of one of the jazz clubs. And so they have...
Well, and if you want to stay out for the live music or anything, I mean, when you have a 2-year-old, that's just blah. Who can't do any of that. So I think that's what I'm probably looking forward to the most on our next visit. Maybe not bringing the kids.
Or bringing the kids, dressing them up like butlers.
Oh.
That would be sweet.
Interesting. Yeah. So go let us know what you are most excited about when you visit Hot Springs. Is it the water, the heart, or the swagger, the attitude and the history surrounding this place? Go let us know on the Dirt in My Shoes Instagram or Facebook page. And as always, you guys are the best. I was just reading through some of the reviews of the podcast this morning when I was working on some stuff. And we love you guys. Thank you so much. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do go leave us a 5-star review. We read through all of those and it just keeps us going. It's so nice to get some good feedback every once in a while. So thank you. We appreciate you. And we hope that you're able to get some dirt in your shoes.